Today, let's continue our practice with factoring by talking about what happens when we are factoring a quadratic with a coefficient of x that is not 1. First, though, let's review what we talked about last week. A quadratic equation's solutions when the function is set equal to 0 are also its x-intercepts, its roots, and its zeros. To find our factors, we find our zeros, and then factors flip, and we write out our factors using parentheses. So in our example shown here, our zeros are at -3 and at 2. So I'm going to write those down. Factors flip. So my -3 becomes x plus 3, and my positive 2 becomes x minus 2. And I write those out using parentheses, x plus 3 in parentheses times x minus 2 in parentheses. So let's look at what happens when we have zeros that are fractions. So here we have an example. A quadratic function has x-intercepts at 3/2, 0, and at -1/2, 0. Which function could be this quadratic? So we are given our zeros here. They are 3/2 and -1/2. Factors flip is what we still do next. So I have x minus 3/2 and x plus 1/2. Now, a fraction cannot be in a factor, so what we do instead is what we call slip and slide. So we take our bottom number on our fraction and we slide that in front of x. So this factor would become 2x minus 3. And our second factor, we do the same thing. The bottom number on the fraction slides in front of x, and that becomes 2x plus 1. So 2x minus 3 in parentheses times 2x plus 1 in parentheses would be my factored form. From here, I would double check my answer in Desmos. I put the original expression, or in this case, the original x-intercepts, and I want to make sure that these x-intercepts it gave me are the same as my answer choice. And when I do that, I do see that this matches up to the information we're given, which means we have the right answer. Let's try another one. Which binomial is a factor of the following expression? 2x squared plus 15x minus 8. So I'm going to start by finding my zeros, and then my factors are going to flip. Any fraction factors, I'm going to have to slip and slide, and then I write out my answer. So let's look first at Desmos, and I'm going to put my expression in the first box. And notice I have a 0 here at -8, 0, and I have another one at 0.5, 0. So my zeros are -8 and 0.5. I can type in 0.5 in my second box here and click that fraction circle, which gives me an answer, but the answer back is a fraction, the equivalent fraction of 1/2. So my zeros are going to be -8 and 1/2. Then I'm going to slip and slide from my bottom fraction here, my bottom number, to slides in front of x. So I write out my answer, x plus 8 in parentheses times 2x minus 1 in parentheses. I am going to go back to Desmos and just make sure my answer matches the original expression. So in my third box here, I'm going to type in my answer choice, and I'm going to make sure that that graph matches the graph that is shown for my original expression. And you see the green graph of my answer lays right on top of the red graph of the original. So that means my answer is correct. X plus 8 is not one of my answer choices, but 2x minus 1 is, so that's the one I circle. let's try another one. When completely factored, 3x squared plus 13x minus 10 equals. So first, I need to find my zeros. Then my factors are going to flip. So I got to Desmos to get zeros first. And I type in the first box my original expression. I see I've got zeros here at -5, 0, and at 0.667. If I type in 0.667 though and hit the fraction button, that doesn't get me an answer back. So just a tip, any factor or fraction that ends in 1/3 or 1/6 or has a multiple of 3 in the bottom doesn't show up well. So if I test a few, 2/3 gives me 0.667. So that looks like that is a match. I'm going to go ahead and write my zeros out of -5 and +2/3. My factors flip, x plus 5 and x minus 2/3. Since I have a fraction, I have to slip and slide, and that bottom number on the fraction 3 is going to slide in front of x. So my answer is x plus 5 times 3x minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put my answer into Desmos and make sure that it lines up with the original. And when I put my answer choice in, I see the green graph of my answer lays right on top of the red graph of the original expression, which means I got my answer right. I'm looking for those two factors in my answer choices. Order doesn't matter, and I find it with answer choice C. So you try one. Pause the video here and find the complete factorization of 4x squared minus 7x minus 2. Hit play when you're ready, and we'll check our answer. All right, so when we put this expression into Desmos, we find that we have zeros of -1/4 and +2. So I'm going to write those out. Factors flip, x plus 1/4 and x minus 2. I can't leave the fraction there, so I slip and slide, and 4 slides in front of x. And I write out my factors, 4x plus 1 in parentheses, x minus 2 in parentheses. And that matches up to answer choice B. When you put your answer in Desmos with the original expression, it does line up and lets us know we have this right. So, what are we going to do if there's only one zero? When completely factored, 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals. So let's give this one a try. We're going to put it in Desmos. And we're going to type our original expression in box 1. If we zoom in a little bit here, you'll see that it touches the x-axis and goes right back up. So we only have 1 0 at 1.5. I can type in 1.5 and click on my fraction button. It changes it to 3/2. So I have 1 0 at 3/2. I'm going to write that down. Remember, my factor flips, but quadratics have two factors. So let's look at this. That means that this is a double root. So I'm going to have a double root at 3/2, which means that factor is going to be squared. So multiplicity of 2, that tells us that the square is our exponent. So our factor will be squared. So factors flip, x minus 3/2. Can't have a fraction in my factor, so I slip and slide. 2 goes in front of x. And I write that out, 2x minus 3. And since I have a double root, I'm going to make that squared. I can check that in Desmos by typing in the third box 2x minus 3 squared. And you notice the green graph of my answer lies right on top of the red one. Now, if I change that to 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3, that's the same thing. We have the same factor twice, so we have really our same exact expression. So, I'm going to choose answer choice A, 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3. So, let's take a look quickly at our greatest common factors. First, to review, what are factors? Factors are numbers we multiply together to get another number. So that means a greatest common factor would be the largest number that is a factor of 2 or more numbers. So here we've got an example. We're going to factor out the greatest common factor. We want the factorization of each term. So we have 2x cubed. So we have a 2 and 2. X cubed, we have 3 x's as our factors. So I'm going to write those out. Now 8 is 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 times 2. And then we have 2 x's, so that's x times x. Well, 16 is twice x, so I'm going to write down my 3 2's, or excuse me, twice 8. So I'll write down my 3 2's that I had for 8 times another 2, but I only have 1 x in this one. So my factorization is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times x. So when we circle the prime factors that all the terms share, we have 3 2's, and we also have 3 x's, 1 in each. If I look, I can't do another 2 because my top expression only has 1. So I'm only looking at what's not circled. So no more 2's. I have 2 x's here, 1 x here, but no x's for 16x left that I haven't circled. So I have the greatest common factor of 2x. Now, luckily, we don't have to do this for all of the expressions we'll see with our greatest common factor. We do have a few tricks up our sleeve to make it a little bit easier. So when you see an answer choice that has a number for our greatest common factor, that means we especially have to watch out for one. Here, we're going to factor like normal and check for a match in Desmos. If it doesn't match, but the zeros are the same, we're going to try the GCF. So let's take a look at this one. We're going to plug it into Desmos to get our zeros. 6x squared minus 27x plus 27. I have zeros at 1.5 and 3. If I type in 1.5 and hit my fraction button, that gives me 3 halves. So I know that my zeros are 3 halves and 3. Factors flip. I have a fraction factor. I can't do that. I slip and slide. So 2x goes in front of, or 2 goes in front of x. So it becomes 2x minus 3. And then we have x minus 3. So I'm going to check it in Desmos by putting my answer choice in the third box. And watch what happens with this graph. You notice my zeros are the same, but the rest of the graph doesn't match up. So what this means, if the zeros are the same, is we've had, in this case, a vertical stretch. And remember, if you from our transformations, then a vertical stretch means we have a number outside of our expression, which means we've got a greatest common factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try out my answer choices. Now, if I look ahead and see what number goes into all 3 of my terms, then that gives me a little bit of a head start. But I don't have to. So, same zeros, no match. We're going to try the GCF. If I notice here that I have 2, well, 2 doesn't go into any of the 3. If I try it, you see the graph doesn't line up. And we're going to try 3 instead. When we try 3, it does match up, which means we found our greatest common factor and the third missing piece of our answer choice. So our answers are 3, 2x minus 3, and x minus 3. All right, last example for today. So it says identify each expression that is a factor of this polynomial. I do want you to try this one, but I am going to give you a hand with this one. So when we plug it into Desmos the first time, we have negative 2.5 as a 0, which changes to negative 5 halves. And then we have 2.333. That one's not clean. So 0.333 means that if we plug that in, we wouldn't get a proper fraction for it. So remember, we try our ones with 3 underneath. Because we have a 2 in front, that means it's going to be greater, and the number on the top is going to be greater than 2 times 3, which is 6. So I'm going to try 7/3, and that's a match. So my zeros are negative 5 halves and 7/3. From this point, I want you guys to try out this on your own. Pause the video, find your factors and your greatest common factor, and come back here and check your answer. You should have gotten x plus 5 halves as the next step and x minus 7/3. Slip and slide. Our 2 goes in front of x. Our 3 goes in front of x here. So we write them out. 2x plus 5 times 3x minus 7. So we're going to try our GCF. When we do that, we find 2 gives us a perfect match. And we can also look and see 2 goes into 12, 2 goes into 2, and 2 goes into 70. 3, if we had tried that, does go into 12, but 3 does not go into 2, so that can't be our answer. So that's a good way of a shortcut to be able to not have to try both unless you want to. So my answers are 2, 2x plus 5, and 3x minus 7. All right, that is it for our video lesson today. Let's practice some.